I was born into a family of coyotes. I use the term coyote, of course, as a nickname for the human smugglers working in the illegal immigrant industry. We've devoted our lives to helping people cross the tightly guarded border between the United States and Mexico, earning our living ferrying them from their old life to a new one. I have always believed that it's a humanitarian act, a necessary duty to help the people of Mexico until a better solution comes along. They're desperate, they're exhausted, and their dreams are dreams of abundance and contentment. That's why I continue the legacy today, even as I know this may change in the coming years, with the looming threat of an impenetrable wall. I do it because I saw my parents, my friends, my neighbors, and my relatives help so many people make their way into the United States. I admired them for the dangerous sacrifices they made every night over desert and through rivers to provide this refuge. All throughout my childhood, they were my real-life heroes, until the night that something crossed the border that never should have. In the 1990s, before the construction of the iron fence that now spans the border, my family of coyotes was living a secluded life in the desert, far outside of El Paso, Texas. We made our home a short distance from the mighty and sweeping Rio Grande, the great river that separated two countries for 1,200 miles. To us, the world was boundless and borderless. We had never seen the ocean. Those years of blissful childhood passed like a sleepy summer daydream. My older brother Victor and I ran wild all through the year, barefoot and filthy, through the mud and the sand, smuggling stones and snakes across borders of our imaginary kingdoms. We were our own masters and parents, and we both knew that after they tucked us into bed at night, Mama and Papa quietly slipped out of the house and headed towards the bridge that crossed the noisy brown river. They'd return sometime before dawn, bearing solemn expressions and smelling of sweat that was not theirs. Then they'd go back to bed and sleep through the hottest part of the day. In those lonely nights, feeling defenseless and vulnerable, Victor and I would wait up for them out on the patio, listening to the songs of the darkness and the language of the night. The unearthly wailing of the coyotes always unsettled me in a way no other brutal truth in my life ever did. In their cries, I felt the ominous encroachment of all things wild and free upon our carefully constructed fortress of civilization and cement, something that neither wall nor river could ever keep out. I curled up closer to my brother, wanting to be held, reaching out for comfort down a dry well. "Wolves," Victor whispered one night, hoping to scare me. "Hungry, fearless wolves." "You're wrong," I said. "Wolves say ah-oo. Coyotes say ah-wah." "Maybe you're right," he said. "It's not coyotes. It's the crying of La Llorona, the wailing woman." "No," I said, not wanting to hear what came next. "That's only a ghost story. Everyone knows it's not true." "She's real. Why wouldn't she be? If a woman drowns her own kids, she deserves to become a ghost. Remember? She was a good mother until her husband left her and found a prettier new wife. And then he tried to take the children from her. They were all she had. How could she let them go? To get revenge on him, she bound up her children with leather straps and threw them into the Rio Grande as they cried and screamed for her mercy. "Stop!" I wept, covering my ears with my hands. This was the worst part of the story. Imagining those little children struggling and terrified as they realized they were about to die at their mother's hands. "Please, Victor, I hate this story." When her husband heard the children's cries, he came running. He was too late to save the children, but not too late to see what she'd done, so he strangled her to death. Now, God is punishing her by forcing her to walk along the riverside. She can't enter heaven until she's found the spirits of her children. But They've been swept away into the water forever, and so she searches for children who are too noisy at night, crying and refusing to sleep. She snatches them up and drowns them in the river, hoping to pass their souls off as the souls of her own children. Nobody can trick God that way, I said. That's true, Victor said. Nobody can, and that's why she'll wander forever. I remember that night, captured like a photograph, burned into my memory with a bright flash of light. I remember my mother returning home at that moment, coming to hold me in her tender arms, carrying me away from the terrors that never sleep. It's not coyotes or ghosts you hear, she whispered. It's the mermaids. In the river? I asked, sitting up in her lap, searching her face for truth. Yes, she said. Sometimes when people try to cross the river, they don't make it all the way. I've seen it, Elisa. They get swept up by the current and they stumble. Maybe they carried too many things on their back. Maybe their arms were cradling a baby and they couldn't steady themselves. But they don't die. No, they don't die. They might be scared at first when the water overwhelms them, which is why they call out in that strange voice you hear. But then the river wraps its gentle hand around them and turns their feet to a fish's tail. It floats them all the way south into the Gulf of Mexico, into the ocean. Mermaids live a very long time. Did you know that? Some say they live forever. They're all there, my love, all of them. I remembered this story a few years later on the night Mama and I last saw each other. On that night, the coyotes cried. It was March 23rd, 1997. 10 days previous, a mysterious sequence of lights had passed over the skies all the way from Las Vegas to southern Arizona, an event known today as the Phoenix Lights. They were described as a triangular formation of flares around a massive black aircraft that blotted out the stars as it slowly drifted south into Mexico, leaving an entire trail of sightings and reports. We hadn't seen anything in El Paso, but we knew that they must have disappeared somewhere close by. It was all anyone could talk about for a while. I was 11 that year, and Victor was 13. Papa had recently been sent to jail after having been caught smuggling 6 men over the border, and Mama had just given birth to my new sister, Gabby. We were beginning to struggle for money. I know she didn't want to take any work as a coyote, not after what happened to my father. But I understand now. It was the only skill she had. She must have felt she had no choice. She didn't think it was too dangerous to merely park the car and wait for someone. And that night, she told us she was taking us along. It'll look less suspicious, she said, if we get caught and the Border Patrol finds a mother with 3 children. Besides, I'm not leaving you two alone with the baby. That's not fair, Victor said, emboldened by his age and his rage and his loneliness. Of course we'll get caught, and we'll all go to jail, and we'll never see Papa or each other ever again. I wanted to speak up against him, to tell him not to talk to Mama like that. I ached to strike him in the mouth so hard that he'd shut up forever. Ever since Papa was taken away, Victor had crowned himself man of the house, and he rigidly enforced the rules, both major and minor. There wasn't a day when he didn't get into a screaming match with Mama, or shoved me against the wall for being in his way, or kicked the baby's toys across the room in his fury. He had gotten his man's height and his man's ego, but not a man's maturity or sensibility. He was a hungry wolf trapped in the body of a lamb. Yet I cowered in that moment, afraid of his anger, too exhausted to confront it. And so we were buckled in and driven out into the desert, to the place where a migrant would be sent to meet us. It was an easy job. All that Mama was expected to do that night was to park on a dirt road a few feet from the river and wait for the woman to arrive. Then she'd take her to the arranged safe house 5 hours north to Roswell, New Mexico. It was farther than she'd ever been asked to go with a migrant, and it was uncommon for them to travel alone like this. But when she was told it was a mother who would be meeting her there to be reunited with her children, she couldn't have turned them down. By the river we waited. All was quiet for a while. Baby Gabby slept. I tried to sleep. The heavens whirled and the full moon rose behind the gathering rain clouds, passing in and out of misty obscurity. A thunderstorm was rolling in. I could smell it on the air, that striking scent of salty ocean air carried across wind-swept deserts, picking up the pungent aroma of mesquite and night-blooming cactus as it crept closer, blotting out the stars one by one. The lightning was erratic and pulsing, like a dying animal's heartbeat, smudging the sky with globules of green, illuminating the hills on the horizon. Then a noise broke the stillness. Wah! La Llorona, Victor hissed into my ear. Mermaids, I whispered. Hush, my mother said to both of us. La Llorona is surely on the hunt tonight, Victor said, eyeing me to judge my reaction. Searching for her children, ready to take the first one she finds. She won't be kept out of heaven by something as small as a little girl. I tried to ignore him. I was old enough now not to believe his ghost stories. But I became impatient when an abnormally loud rumble from the sky woke baby Gabby. She started to scream. Why are we still waiting? I asked Mama, grumpy and anxious. It's been hours. I know, Mama said. She should have arrived by now. Something's gone wrong. She got out of the car and walked around to the hatchback, reaching into the diaper bag for a clean diaper. She peered around her into the now moonless gloom. Something was definitely wrong. It seemed to be prickling at the edges of our senses. We all could feel it, although we had no name for it. Why don't we just go home? Victor said, his deepening voice abruptly cracking and revealing what was that underneath his hardened adult shell. Was it the vulnerable flesh of a scared little boy, a child forced suddenly into a man's body? Desperately trying to grasp whatever power he could in a situation where he felt utterly powerless? What was he afraid of? Did he fear the coyotes? Or did he truly fear La Llorona, as children do? I thought back to earlier that night, a lifetime ago, when I wanted to slap him. I contemplated teasing him for being scared of La Llorona, or the coyotes, or whatever shadowy things lurked in the desert. But I dared not. Because I was watching out the backseat window of the car over Mama's shoulder, watching something. In the distance, emerging from the river, a person? A person-like figure? An amorphous manifestation of silvery starshine? I couldn't tell. But whatever it was moving closer, heading towards the car. Illuminated by a sudden flash of lightning, I could see for a moment that its skin was white as salt and shone hairless and smooth in the pale moonlight. Its legs were long and bent backwards. It was tall, so tall, unbelievably, inhumanly tall. The howling noise was much closer now, and it was most certainly not the coyote songs. The lightning and thunder were out of sync, and the orbs of light in the sky got bigger and brighter, undimmed by clouds, as they blinked with an erratic rhythm, casting us in and out of that eerie green light. I reached for Victor, but he had settled himself into the driver's seat and locked the doors, trapping Mama outside the car. Confused and annoyed, she pulled a few times at the driver's side door handle. It wouldn't open. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Open the door, please." "I'm taking control of this car," he said. "I'm tired of this." "Victor," I said. "Control?" she shouted as the baby screamed in alarm. "No, you're not. Knock it off and unlock this car." "You're not getting back in," he calmly replied, "until you promise to take us home and never pick up migrants ever again." "Unlock it," she yelled, her furious face pressed against the glass. "Nah," Victor said. "Your father would be so ashamed if he saw you behaving like this. You're not a man like him. You're an immature and disrespectful little rat. You know that?" "La Llorona is here," I whispered. "What are you going to do to stop me?" he continued to taunt, staring her down. "She's here for the children," I said again. "Just stop," Victor yelled at me. The thing in the shadows was closer now, much too close. I know it saw me watching it. Its dark, enormous eyes did not blink, for they had no lids. Its lipless mouth opened slowly, and it howled again. For a moment, Mama's face was also lit up by a rapid bolt of lightning spreading across the sky like a bioluminescent jellyfish. She turned towards the howling noise with a look of concern, but in an instant the lightning was gone, and the creature was hidden by murk and night once again. "Accept the terms," Victor said stubbornly, folding his arms. "You won't listen to us, so I won't listen to you. Because you shouldn't have brought us. You care about some stranger more than you care about us. Because you're a terrible mother. You're the worst mother that ever lived. I wish you had gone to jail instead." Mama's eyes turned to me, drawn into myself like a baby rabbit, too scared to move from the back seat. "Elisa," she sighed. "Elisa, just open the door." "I'll lock you out too if you try," Victor warned me. I was petrified. I felt as if I'd been struck by lightning. "Elisa," she said again, gently but solemnly. "Rain is coming and I don't want to get wet. Gabby won't stop crying until her diaper is changed. Please open the door for me." "Don't do it," Victor said. "We've got to take control. We've got to teach her a lesson that she can't lead us around like goats on a rope. This isn't fair and you know it, Elisa. She knows it too, but she doesn't care. We have to make her care about us just for once." The creature was so close to the car now, it walked with slow, staggered, lurching steps. "If you make me stand out here in the rain," suddenly a shriek. The sound tore the night open with a gash of unearthly light. This time they both saw it. Mama looked over her shoulder. Her face changed. "Elisa!" she screamed, pressing her face against the car window. Victor froze. "We'll go home," she begged him. "Let me inside. I promise you, we'll go home." I still remember how hard I tried to open it. I swear to heaven, I struggled over Victor to reach the door, and I tried to unlock it in time. But my hands were stiffened with fright and panic, and they faltered and fumbled with the lock. Like in a dream, my hands moved too slowly as time moved too quickly around me. Victor was immobilized by his shame and terror. He made no move to help me. His eyes were locked on what was approaching. La Llorona leaped towards the car. I jumped back, instinctively protecting the baby. We watched as our mother was pounced upon by the spindly-legged thing with the ghostly skin and bulbous head. It seemed all bony limbs in that moment, flailing and grasping and pulling Mama down to the ground with an animalistic violence. Its long-fingered hands grasped her around the neck and began to drag her away as she kicked and struggled. It was dragging her towards the churning waters of the Rio Grande, and in an instant, a flash of green light suddenly struck the ground in a blaze as bright as the sun. I covered my eyes against its painful brilliance. The deafening peal of thunder that followed couldn't drown out our screams. When I looked again, Mama was gone. La Llorona was gone. Victor was still holding me. I held on to Gabby, who was wailing and wailing. He never let go of me all through the rest of that night. We sat, silent and stunned, watching the clouds clear, moving on north across the mountains, having never released their rain. We watched the green lights in the sky convene and make a triangle that slowly drifted south. We waited until the sun began to spread its fiery crown above the horizon, blood-red and grim. Then, finally, we opened the door. Like bears emerging from a cave after a winter of transformation, we took our cautious steps outward and beyond. The ground all around us for an entire square mile was burnt with rings of still smoldering fire. Nothing was left alive. Even the dust and sand were scorched so hot they'd turned into dusky green glass. We walked for a while along the road, taking turns carrying the baby, until a highway patrol car picked us up. The police said they couldn't do much to help us. They didn't believe our story naturally. They figured it was likely the woman my mother had intended to pick up was an escaped hostage of a gang, and that Mama had been mistaken for this woman. There was no use searching for either of them. There never was. People who go missing on the border stay missing forever. But they wouldn't or couldn't answer our questions about the green lights that had throbbed and pulsed so closely above us. They refused to connect the appearance of those lights to what millions in Las Vegas and Phoenix had seen only a few hundred miles west, only 10 days before we saw them. Nor would they eventually link this event to subsequent disappearances of other refugees crossing the border. For years, I couldn't shake my belief that I had seen her taken away by La Llorona, alerted to her presence by the cries of my baby sister. Victor wouldn't hear it. Having finally become a man, he found the whole idea of a mythical wailing woman absurd, and yet even he had no explanation for what had happened. He had seen what I had seen, but it burdened him in his deepest heart, a place too wounded to ever revisit. After a while, Papa came home. He said he'd been set free by some outside interests, and shortly after his return home, on the night the green lightning hovered over our backyard, he walked outside and disappeared again. And so we learned to live with the mysterious lightning flickering above us in a clamor and cacophony of spring and summertime thunder, only ever appearing on the nights the migrants failed to arrive, where Victor and I parked on the river's edge, never appearing on the nights we were given instructions to drive migrants to an abandoned airfield in Roswell. But that's a story whose ending I don't know yet. For tonight, I will tell you this. A decade after Mama disappeared, I was awoken in the night, suddenly pulled from sleep by the cries of the coyotes outside my window. In an instant, I remembered her story of the mermaids of the Rio Grande, that those who are lost in the river do not die, but are transformed. Then they are safely and gently carried into the ocean, where they live and swim forever in boundless, immortal freedom. It's a place with no borders, no hunger, and no lonely nights. I woke Gabby and led her to my car. We drove southeast all through the night, down to the place where the raging river meets the sweet-natured sea. We reached it by late afternoon. We stood on the pale sands of that warm seashore and looked out upon the waves. I thought I saw the flick and flash of a turquoise tail, knowing as I did that it was probably just a dolphin. But I hoped that it was not.